at Prison Planet as we work for a team. Paul Watson, thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Paul, are you going to Julio's to eat?
No, I don't live in that area anymore. It's a new restaurant.
Where are you going, Paul?
It's called West 10, if you want to.
People can join him there and eat. Say hi to Ehan for me. All right, there goes Watson. I'm out of control. Naomi Wolf, you have the floor. Go through the steps, your new book, the new video, and the points you're making. I have done a classic Alex Jones. Go ahead.
Sure thing. Well, I'm grateful to you. And it is, I guess what I do want to say is we're in a time where this kind of brainstorming among citizens, not just us, but, all of my readers, all of your listeners and readers and viewers, we all have access to information that we need to educate one another about and use our critical intelligence about it and find solutions among ourselves, because clearly we can no longer trust many of our state-supported or corporate-supported institutions to do it for us. So this is exactly what people should be doing across the country, is bringing each other information and checking it out and planning for action. So very quickly, the 10 steps, well, invoke a terrifying internal and external threat, often a real one, create a prison system outside the rule of law where torture takes place, develop a paramilitary force not answerable to the people, create a surveillance apparatus aimed at ordinary citizens, start to infiltrate and harass citizens' groups, start to target key individuals, start to arbitrarily detain and release citizens. You start to create legislation. We're seeing it more and more. You mentioned the RNC 8 legislation that criminalizes speech or expands the definition of terrorist or traitor or spy so that ordinary citizens who are engaged in dissent get criminalized. Then you start to see restrictions of the press, like the arrests of journalists we spoke about. And finally, we're at step 10, which is subvert the rule of law and make it easier to declare martial law. And so to just make sure that I tell you the hopeful news, it's that I did, since we last spoke, Alex, study times and places where citizens effectively fought back against encroaching darkness of this kind. And so I learned what always works. And I offer citizens in Give Me Liberty, which is the sequel to The End of American, which is just out now, exactly those lessons from other times and places where citizens did fight back as real patriots and revolutionaries. But I also go to the founding generation, ordinary people from all walks of life who were captivated by this vision of liberty we were supposed to inherit. And I go back to the 7 core principles we're supposed to hold on to as Americans in a time of crisis like this, and in a time where we're being bombarded with what I call fake patriotism to accept what I call a fake democracy, a sham of a democracy. And finally, I give citizens at the end of Give Me Liberty 55 action steps they can take in building this new army, a transpartisan army of patriot revolutionaries, taking back the power that we should be having.
Oh, I love that term, transpartisan.
Yeah, it's important.
No longer being... Okay, now go back to Posse Comitatus, the point you were trying to make earlier when I kind of went off the rabbit trail of ferreting documentation for you. And then later I did find the AP article, and it's exactly as we said. And,
well, I'm so glad, but in the meantime, just before I go back to it, why... I mean, I feel stupid asking you this because I'm in the mainstream media, but why aren't any mainstream news outlets covering the deployment of the 1st Brigade? The ACLU just filed a Freedom of Information request demanding to know where they are and what they're here for. But I'm just gobsmacked that there's no independent reporting. And the one thing I was wondering is, do you think it's classified? I mean, are journalists in a position that they're not reporting on it because it's considered classified?
Yeah.
What's your view of it?
Yes, and we have the classified documents fell into our hands because an FBI agent on the day before Thanksgiving in just south of Temple on I-35, the Army came up and told Mike Hansen, my camera guy who was driving back from visiting family, to turn his camera off, and Mike refused. So the FBI showed up an hour later and gave him classified documents by accident. And then they
Are you serious?
No. They had gotten Mike's number. That they had asked for it, and he gave it. And they called a few hours later after he left his cell phone, demanding it back. In fact, get me Mike Hansen. I'm gonna later in the next hour we'll get Mike on. I mean, there's video. All this, Naomi. It's on video. The FBI pulling up and giving it to him. They completely screwed up.
Right, but why? How does this go to why journalists aren't covering the deployment of the 1st Brigade?
because their editors, I mean, it came out that Bush has spent billions a year on fake news reporters and Operation Mockingbird. But again, in intelligence, and I know you know this, I'm just for the audience, and I know most of them know it. The point is, in intelligence, you can always hear the official propaganda from the mountaintop, but then you can go on the ground and assess it and observe it. And I mean, I remember in 1999 going to Urban Warrior. This is bipartisan. This is the military industrial complex, COG, continuity of government. And there are the Marines training with role players, over 200 of them, with foreign troops, screaming, "I'm an American, please no, not the camp." And then the Marines were allowing me to videotape. Well, first off, let me explain this. They had journalist tours to the part of the city and a university that was shut down for the urban warfare drills, practicing taking over an American city. And for journalists, they would say, "This is for Bosnia, this is for Macedonia." But then I sent people in, local activists, because they knew who I was. The Marines wouldn't let me get in there. I sent in activists posing as citizens who wanted a tour. And for them, they would show Marines doing interrogations. "Where are you from?" "I'm from San Francisco." "Where'd you get the weapons?" And so then I would watch. This is all on video, by the way. So we sent infiltrators in. And then I had this former Marine Corps captain who was in private, who was their PR guy, Steve Jones, following me. He's on video running up saying, "Get out of here, Jones," trying to block me when I'm at the fence videoing. But little did he know I had people inside. The cordoned off area. They had 2,000 Marines, foreign troops, tanks, helicopters. It was so shocking with the Coronado landing, the amphibious attack ship, with the amphibious craft landing in Oakland, that I put it out, and people couldn't believe it. They thought I had hired tanks, helicopters, and armies.
I've got to hand it to you, Alex. You are very resourceful. That's extraordinary. I mean, I could see, just to be kind of measured, because this is really a time to kind of triple think everything, not to hold us back, but I could see a legitimate government with legitimate interest in its citizens' well-being doing, a mock evacuation scenario, out of good intentions. But what I'm hearing more and more about the deployment and why now after 200 years, and I just posted a piece on BuzzFlash that people can read where I quote members of military circles and police forces and National Guard saying, "Hey, wait a minute, why do we need these soldiers since, the National Guard can do this, and, we've got police forces who can do this, and we've got emergency people trained in evacuation who can do this." Many people are raising a hue and cry.
Naomi,
so
no, go ahead.
And the last thing I wanted to say is what chills me particularly is I have this wonderful, heroic, patriotic American major from the Air Force, David Antoon, who's a hero, whom I interviewed in Give Me Liberty. He stood up to the Bush administration, and his whole family's on the watch list now. But I said to him, because I'm a civilian, I said, "So, Major Antoon, if first he explained to me that these warriors don't, answer to Congress, and they don't answer to the people, they answer to the president." And I said, "So if the president says arrest these citizens, what happens?" And he said, "They have to do it." And I said, "Well, if the president says arrest Congress, what happens?" And he said, "They have to do it." And I said, "Well, if senior members of the military say, don't obey these orders, what happens?" And he said, "Well, they get arrested because these orders, the horror is these orders are not illegal. Soldiers are allowed to disobey illegal orders. They are now legal. What they are is immoral."
Yeah, but those signing statements have been thrown out on its face, and there's no Fuhrer precept or Nixon saying, it's not illegal when the president does it. The Congress is co-equal. And just because Lincoln arrested a few members of Congress, that was later thrown out of court, but that was done retroactively, and newspaper editors. So Congress is co-equal, just like PDD 51, the Homeland Security Committee this year wanted to see it, and the executive said, "No, you can't," but the cover sheet says that Bush is basically dictator. So on its face, that is a fraud. And unfortunately, the media is spinning what you're saying as you're saying George Bush will do this by the election. And what I get from what you're saying is, no, this apparatus has been set up, and the office of the presidency has built this around itself, whether it's Barack Obama or whether it's John McCain. This threat continues. Can you speak to that?
Sure. And, let me stress, how can I put this? It's really important for us to understand understand, to think differently. We're not in constitutional republic time now. We're in police state time, in the sense that it doesn't have to happen at a certain time frame for it to be a dangerous precedent. I mean, that's what, and I'm not being a radical extremist in saying this. This is how the founders wanted us to think. They wanted us to be just as freaked out that that the president has arrogated a private army to himself, whether or not he does anything with that private army before the election, after the election. They want us to freak out that that has taken place, because it upends this delicate system of checks and balances and this absolutely delicate fabric of freedom that we have in America, or that we're supposed to have, in which we do not face soldiers on our streets, in our homes, terrifying us.